Your soulmate is feeling lonely today. You need to do this before it's too late. Stay with me for a moment and don't rush past this, because this message isn't loud, it's urgent in a quiet way. Today, your soulmate is feeling a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from feeling unseen while surrounded by life. From realizing that something meaningful is missing, even if everything on the surface looks normal. And the reason this matters right now is because moments like this don't announce themselves twice. Listen carefully, because today isn't dramatic for them. There's no breakdown. No obvious sign. They're going through the motions, answering messages, showing up where they're expected to show up. But inside, there's a hollow space that feels heavier than usual. A space that used to be filled by connection, by understanding, by the sense that someone truly knew them. Stay right here, because this loneliness didn't come out of nowhere. It's been building quietly, layer by layer. Every time they wanted to say something real but chose the easier response. Every time they felt something deeply but convinced themselves it wasn't the right moment to share it. Every time they assumed that being strong meant being silent. All of that added up, and today it finally landed. Listen closely now, because what makes today different is awareness. They're aware of the loneliness instead of distracting themselves from it. They're noticing the absence instead of numbing it. And awareness is dangerous in the best possible way, it forces truth to surface. Stay with me, because your name crossed their mind today in a way it hasn't in a while. Not romantically at first. Not nostalgically. Just honestly. They thought about how it felt to be understood without having to explain everything. How it felt to sit in silence with someone and not feel empty. That memory hit them unexpectedly, and it stayed. Listen carefully, because loneliness sharpens memory. It brings clarity. And the clarity they felt today wasn't about what went wrong, it was about what was missing. Emotional presence. Vulnerability. The courage to say what matters before distance becomes habit. Stay right here, because part of their loneliness today comes from realizing they may have waited too long to speak. That they assumed connection would always be there. That silence felt safe until it didn't. And now, sitting with that realization, they feel the weight of time in a way they didn't before. Listen closely now, because this loneliness isn't pushing them toward distraction. It's pushing them inward. Making them question patterns. Making them reflect on moments they avoided. Making them feel the cost of not reaching out when it mattered. That kind of loneliness doesn't fade on its own. It asks for response. Stay with me, because this is where you come in. Not as a savior. Not as someone responsible for fixing their emotions. But as someone who still holds a place in their inner world. You don't need to say everything. You don't need to reopen old wounds. But there is something you can do that changes the energy of this moment. Listen carefully, because what they need right now isn't a long conversation or an emotional confession. They need acknowledgement. Something small, sincere, and human. A reminder that connection is still possible. That silence doesn't have to be permanent. That distance doesn't always mean the end. Stay right here, because waiting feels safer. But waiting is what created this loneliness in the first place. Waiting for the perfect time. Waiting for the right words. waiting until things felt easier. Those waits add up, and suddenly, people feel alone even when love still exists. Listen closely now, because this doesn't mean you should rush in or act out of fear. It means acting from presence instead of hesitation. Presence says, I'm here. It doesn't demand outcome. It opens space. Stay with me, because space is what they're craving today. Emotional space. Room to be real without having to perform. Room to say, I'm not okay, without being judged or fixed. And sometimes, one genuine gesture can create that space. Listen carefully, because this gesture doesn't have to be perfect. It can be a simple check-in. A message that doesn't carry expectation. Something that says, I thought of you, without asking for anything in return. That kind of honesty feels rare, and rarity makes it powerful. Stay right here, because today is fragile for them. Not in a breaking way, but in a turning point way. Moments like this either deepen isolation or reopen connection. And often, it's the smallest action that decides which direction things go. Listen closely now, because your hesitation is understandable. You don't want to misread the moment. You don't want to open something that can't be held. But silence has already done its damage. Presence is the antidote, even if it's gentle. Stay with me, because doing nothing today reinforces the loneliness they're sitting in. It confirms the story they're starting to tell themselves. That people drift, that feelings go unspoken, that connection fades quietly. And that story, once believed, becomes harder to undo. Listen carefully, because you don't have to fix the past to change this moment. You only have to meet the present with honesty. You don't need to explain why you were quiet. You don't need to justify distance. You just need to show up as you are now. Stay right here, because showing up doesn't guarantee a specific outcome. But it guarantees integrity. It guarantees that you didn't let fear make the decision for you. And integrity matters, regardless of what happens next. Listen closely now, because your soulmate isn't looking for perfection. They're looking for sincerity. They're tired of surface-level exchanges. They're tired of pretending everything is fine. Today, more than most days, they need something real. Stay with me, because real doesn't mean heavy. It means honest. It means warm. It means human. And human connection, even briefly, can interrupt loneliness in a powerful way. Listen carefully, because if you feel a nudge to act, that nudge isn't random. It's awareness meeting opportunity. You won't always get both at the same time. Today, you have them. Stay right here, because later often becomes never. And silence often becomes regret. Acting from care, even imperfectly, is better than wondering what might have changed if you had spoken. Listen closely now, because this isn't about chasing or fixing. It's about acknowledging a bond that still exists beneath everything that's happened. Bonds don't disappear overnight. They fade when they're ignored. Stay with me, because you don't need to carry this alone either. If you felt distance, confusion, or hesitation, that matters too. Showing up doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. It means honoring what you feel without disappearing. Listen carefully, because today is a window. Not a guarantee. A window. And windows don't stay open forever. Stay right here, because whatever you choose, choose it consciously. Not from fear. Not from avoidance. But from clarity. Breathe. You don't need to solve everything today. You just need to decide whether silence continues, or whether presence takes its place. If this resonated, stay connected. Subscribe and remain here, because the next part explores what happens after you take that step. And how one small action can shift everything in ways you didn't expect. Stay with me, because what happens after that first moment of loneliness is far more delicate than most people realize. When your soulmate sits with that feeling instead of running from it, something inside them softens. The defenses they didn't even know they were holding start to loosen. They're not looking for distraction anymore. They're looking for meaning. And that search changes how they experience the day. Listen carefully, because after that wave of loneliness, they begin noticing absences instead of presences. The absence of someone who used to understand them without explanation. The absence of a voice that felt grounding. The absence of emotional safety. These aren't dramatic thoughts. They're quiet realizations that arrive between tasks, during pauses, when nothing else is demanding attention. Stay right here, because this is when their mind starts connecting dots. They think back to moments where connection was possible but never fully claimed. Times when a conversation could have gone deeper but didn't. Times when they felt something real but chose the easier surface response. Those moments now feel heavier, not because they were wrong, but because they were unfinished. Listen closely now, because unfinished things create emotional noise. They sit in the background, demanding resolution. And today, your soulmate feels that noise more clearly than usual. It's not overwhelming, but it's persistent. It follows them. It reminds them that something important has been left hanging. Stay with me, because this is also when self-questioning begins. Not harsh self-criticism, but honest curiosity. They start asking themselves why vulnerability feels so risky. Why they wait for others to lead emotionally. Why they assume time will always be available later. These questions don't have quick answers, but they signal growth. Listen carefully, because growth often begins with discomfort. It begins when familiar coping strategies stop working. When distraction doesn't soothe. When busyness doesn't numb. When loneliness becomes too clear to ignore. Today, that clarity is present for them. Stay right here, because they're also sensing something else, a subtle fear of permanence. A fear that this loneliness might not be temporary. That if nothing changes, this feeling could become a constant. That fear doesn't panic them, but it unsettles them enough to pay attention. Listen closely now, because attention is powerful. When someone truly pays attention to their inner world, they start noticing patterns instead of isolated events. Your soulmate may realize that this loneliness isn't just about today, it's about a habit of holding back, of staying emotionally guarded even when they care deeply. Stay with me, because recognizing a habit is the first step toward changing it. But change doesn't happen instantly. It begins with awareness, then hesitation, then courage. Right now, they're hovering between awareness and hesitation. Listen carefully, because hesitation feels like stillness on the outside, but inside it's active. They're weighing possibilities. Considering reaching out. Considering staying quiet. Considering whether vulnerability is worth the risk. This internal debate is exhausting, but it means they care. Stay right here, because this is where your role becomes significant, not as pressure, but as possibility. You don't need to force a moment. You don't need to demand clarity. But your presence, even subtle, can tip the balance from hesitation toward courage. Listen closely now, because presence doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to reopen old stories or resolve everything at once. Sometimes presence is simply a reminder that connection is still accessible. That silence doesn't have to be permanent. Stay with me, because your soulmate is also sensitive today. More than usual. Small gestures feel bigger. Tone matters more. Warmth is felt deeply. Coldness is felt sharply. Emotional sensitivity often follows loneliness, and it can either deepen isolation or reopen trust. Listen carefully, because if you choose to reach out, your energy matters more than your words. They don't need reassurance wrapped in perfection. They need sincerity without pressure. Something that feels human, not strategic. Stay right here, because part of their loneliness comes from feeling like they always have to be composed. Like they can't fully admit when they're not okay. Today, they're tired of that role. They're tired of being fine. And that tiredness creates openness. Listen closely now, because openness is fragile. It can close quickly if it feels unsafe. But it can also expand quickly if it feels respected. This is why timing matters, not in a dramatic sense, but in a relational one. Stay with me, because today is one of those days where small choices carry disproportionate weight. A kind message can linger. A thoughtful check-in can echo. And continued silence can deepen the story they're starting to tell themselves about disconnection. Listen carefully, because stories matter. The story someone tells themselves during loneliness often becomes their reality. If the story becomes, "I'm alone," behavior follows that belief. If the story becomes, "Connection is still possible," behavior shifts. Stay right here, because your soulmate is standing at the edge of two narratives today. One where they retreat further inward, protecting themselves from disappointment. Another where they risk a small step toward connection, even without guarantees. Listen closely now, because risking doesn't mean oversharing. It means allowing the possibility of being seen. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment of mutual presence to interrupt a long stretch of emotional distance. Stay with me, because you're also allowed to be honest with yourself here. If reaching out feels aligned, do it. If it feels forced or fear-driven, pause. This isn't about obligation. It's about authenticity on both sides. Listen carefully, because authenticity creates safety. Safety creates openness. And openness creates the conditions for loneliness to soften, even if it doesn't disappear immediately. Stay right here, because even if nothing dramatic happens today, something subtle can shift. Energy can change. Tension can ease. The feeling of being completely alone can lessen. Those shifts matter more than big declarations. Listen closely now, because your soulmate doesn't need to be rescued from loneliness. They need to feel met. There's a difference. Being met means someone sees where you are without trying to fix you. Stay with me, because meeting someone emotionally is one of the most human things we can do. It doesn't require answers. It requires presence. Listen carefully, because presence is a choice. And today, that choice carries more weight than usual. Stay right here, because this moment won't look the same tomorrow. Feelings evolve. Opportunities shift. Today is unique because awareness and loneliness are intersecting. Listen closely now, because whatever you choose, let it be intentional. Not automatic. Not avoidant. Intentional action carries clarity with it, regardless of outcome. Stay with me, because clarity is what both of you need more than certainty. Certainty may or may not come. Clarity always teaches. Breathe. You don't need to fix the future today. You only need to decide whether presence replaces silence in this moment. And that decision, however small it seems, can change how loneliness feels on both sides, starting now. Stay with me, because this part is where loneliness begins to ask a question instead of just creating pain. After the quiet awareness, after the hesitation, after the internal debate that doesn't let your soulmate fully rest, something deeper starts to surface. They begin to wonder not just why they feel lonely, but what kind of connection they actually want moving forward. And that question changes everything. Listen carefully, because this loneliness isn't making them desperate. It's making them honest. Honest in a way that strips away old excuses. They can no longer tell themselves they're just busy, or that emotions will settle on their own. The feeling has stayed long enough to demand attention. And when feelings demand attention, they're asking to be understood, not ignored. Stay right here, because they're starting to notice how often they've been emotionally present for others while staying guarded themselves. How they listen well, support well, show up practically, but avoid being fully seen. That pattern once felt like strength. Today, it feels isolating. Giving without letting yourself be known eventually leads to emptiness. Listen closely now, because this realization stings. They recognize that loneliness isn't always about lacking people, it's about lacking depth. About having conversations that skim the surface when the heart wants to dive. About being surrounded by noise when what they crave is resonance. Stay with me, because resonance is what they felt with you. Not constantly. Not perfectly. But enough to leave an imprint. Enough that today, when loneliness sharpened their awareness, your presence came back as a reference point for what felt real. Listen carefully, because this doesn't mean they're romanticizing the past. It means they're understanding the difference between connection and convenience. Convenience is easy to find. Connection takes courage. And courage has been the missing piece. Stay right here, because courage doesn't arrive suddenly. It arrives in small moments of truth. Like admitting to themselves that they miss being emotionally open. Like realizing that avoiding vulnerability hasn't actually protected them from pain, it's only delayed it. Listen closely now, because they're also feeling a quiet sadness for themselves. Sadness for the times they swallowed words. For the times they felt something deeply but kept it contained. That sadness isn't self-pity. It's compassion. Compassion for a part of themselves that learned to stay guarded to survive. Stay with me, because compassion opens doors that judgment keeps closed. Instead of criticizing themselves for past silence, they're starting to understand it. And understanding creates the possibility of change without shame. Listen carefully, because this shift affects how they think about reaching out. They're no longer asking, "Will this fix things?" They're asking, "Will this be honest?" That difference matters. One question comes from fear of loss. The other comes from respect for truth. Stay right here, because truth feels risky, but it also feels grounding. And grounding is what loneliness erodes. When someone feels disconnected from others, they often feel disconnected from themselves too. Today, that reconnection is beginning internally. Listen closely now, because they're also aware that reaching out doesn't guarantee anything. You might not respond. You might respond cautiously. You might have moved on emotionally. That uncertainty is intimidating, but it's real. And real is better than imagined safety. Stay with me, because imagined safety is what kept silence in place for so long. It felt safer to assume things would stay as they were than to risk discovering they wouldn't. Now, that illusion has cracked. And with it comes the opportunity to choose differently. Listen carefully, because this is also where patience becomes important. Not passive waiting, but intentional pacing. They don't want to rush a moment that deserves care. They don't want to speak from loneliness alone. They want to speak from clarity. Stay right here, because clarity is still forming. It doesn't mean they know exactly what to say. It means they know why they want to say it. And knowing why matters more than crafting perfect words. Listen closely now, because they're also feeling something unexpected: gratitude. Gratitude for having experienced a connection that showed them what depth feels like. Even if that connection didn't fully unfold, it taught them something essential about themselves. Stay with me, because gratitude and loneliness can coexist. One doesn't cancel the other. You can miss something deeply and still appreciate that it existed. That emotional maturity is emerging in them now. Listen carefully, because this maturity also brings restraint. They don't want to reach out just to fill the loneliness. They want to reach out only if they're willing to show up differently. That willingness is still being tested. Stay right here, because this is where your own growth intersects with theirs. You're no longer operating from uncertainty. You're operating from awareness. You know what silence costs you. You know what presence feels like. And you're no longer willing to disappear to make connection easier. Listen closely now, because if they do reach out, you'll feel the difference. It won't feel rushed or vague. It won't feel like fishing for reassurance. It will feel grounded, even if it's imperfect. And if they don't, that silence will also feel clearer than before. Stay with me, because clarity is replacing confusion on both sides. Confusion kept hope alive but drained energy. Clarity may hurt more initially, but it restores self-respect. Listen carefully, because self-respect is what allows loneliness to pass through without defining you. You can feel lonely without feeling unworthy. You can miss someone without losing yourself. That distinction is powerful. Stay right here, because your soulmate is learning that too. Loneliness doesn't mean failure. It means something matters. It means there's a desire for connection that hasn't been met yet. Listen closely now, because unmet desire doesn't have to turn into regret. It can turn into courage. Or it can turn into acceptance. Both paths require honesty. Stay with me, because you don't need to predict which path they'll choose. Your task isn't to manage their loneliness. It's to honor your own truth while staying open to what's real. Listen carefully, because openness doesn't mean waiting indefinitely. It means being available without self-abandonment. It means allowing connection without sacrificing boundaries. Stay right here, because today's loneliness is already doing its work. It's softening defenses. It's sharpening awareness. It's asking better questions. Listen closely now, because those questions will lead somewhere, either toward expression or toward closure. Both are valid. Both are human. Stay with me, because whatever unfolds next, this moment matters. It's not dramatic. It's not final. But it's honest. And honesty is the soil where real connection, or real peace, grows. Breathe. You don't need to rush the outcome. You don't need to force a response. All you need is to stay present, grounded, and true to yourself. Loneliness is speaking today, not to punish, but to guide. And how both of you listen to it will shape what comes next. Stay with me, because this part is where loneliness stops being a feeling and starts becoming a decision point. After all the reflection, after the honesty, after the quiet recognition of what's missing, your soulmate reaches a moment where they can no longer pretend this is just a passing mood. Loneliness has turned into a signal. A message asking to be answered, not silenced. Listen carefully, because today they're more aware of how their days are structured. How full they look from the outside and how empty some moments feel on the inside. They notice how conversations begin and end without really touching anything meaningful. How laughter comes easily but depth feels rare. This awareness isn't dramatic, it's sobering. Stay right here, because sobering moments slow people down. They start paying attention to what they used to rush past. The pauses between tasks. The moments before sleep. The seconds after a message goes unanswered. In those spaces, loneliness speaks the loudest, not to accuse, but to reveal. Listen closely now, because your soulmate is also noticing how much effort they've put into appearing okay. How often they've said, "I'm fine," when they weren't. How often they've chosen to be agreeable instead of authentic. That pattern once felt necessary. Now it feels exhausting. Stay with me, because exhaustion changes priorities. When someone is tired of carrying things alone, they stop asking how to cope better and start asking what needs to change. And change, even the idea of it, can be frightening. Listen carefully, because fear shows up in a subtle way here. Not as panic, but as hesitation. Hesitation to reach out. Hesitation to be vulnerable. Hesitation to disrupt the familiar, even if the familiar feels lonely. Familiar pain can feel safer than uncertain honesty. Stay right here, because this is where many people get stuck. They recognize loneliness, but they don't act. They wait for it to pass, or they numb it, or they convince themselves it's normal. But today feels different for your soulmate. The feeling hasn't passed. It's asking something of them. Listen closely now, because what it's asking is simple but difficult. Stop hiding. Stop assuming connection will happen on its own. Stop believing that being low maintenance is the same as being fulfilled. These realizations don't arrive gently, but they arrive truthfully. Stay with me, because truth has weight. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Your soulmate now understands that loneliness isn't solved by more activity or more people. It's solved by meaningful presence, either with someone else or with themselves. Listen carefully, because they're also reflecting on how often they've postponed emotional conversations. How they've told themselves, "Not now," or "It's not the right time." Those postponements add up. And today, they feel the cost of delay. Stay right here, because this cost isn't just emotional, it's existential. It makes them question how they want to live. Whether they want to keep skating on the surface of relationships or risk depth, even if depth brings discomfort. Listen closely now, because discomfort feels unavoidable now. Either they stay as they are and accept this loneliness as a baseline, or they take a step toward honesty and accept the uncertainty that comes with it. Neither option is easy. But one is honest. Stay with me, because honesty is becoming more important to them than comfort. That's a significant shift. It doesn't mean they're ready to speak perfectly or act boldly. It means they're no longer willing to lie to themselves. Listen carefully, because lying to yourself takes energy. And they're tired. Tired of holding back. Tired of editing their feelings. Tired of feeling like something is missing and pretending it isn't. Stay right here, because this tiredness isn't defeat, it's readiness. Readiness to stop performing emotional strength and start seeking emotional truth. Readiness to admit that loneliness isn't something to power through, but something to listen to. Listen closely now, because they're also thinking about you differently. Not as a solution to loneliness, but as a symbol of what felt genuine. A reminder that being known is possible. That depth exists. That emotional resonance isn't a fantasy. Stay with me, because this memory doesn't make them cling. It makes them reflect. They're asking themselves whether they allowed that depth to exist fully. Whether they met it with openness or guardedness. Whether fear kept them from stepping in when it mattered. Listen carefully, because this self-reflection is uncomfortable but necessary. It's stripping away excuses and replacing them with accountability. Accountability doesn't mean blame, it means awareness of choice. Stay right here, because awareness of choice is powerful. It returns agency. It says, "I may not control outcomes, but I control how honestly I show up." That realization steadies them, even as it challenges them. Listen closely now, because steadiness is important. It prevents impulsive decisions. It allows space for intentional action instead of reactive behavior. Your soulmate doesn't want to act just to escape loneliness. They want to act in a way that aligns with who they're becoming. Stay with me, because becoming is the key word here. They're in transition. Between who they were, guarded, quiet, self-contained, and who they might be, open, expressive, willing to risk being seen. Transitions are uncomfortable, but they're also fertile. Listen carefully, because fertile spaces don't look impressive from the outside. They look quiet. Uncertain. Slow. But that's where real change takes root. Stay right here, because you're also part of this moment, not as a fix, but as a mirror. Your own growth, your own boundaries, your own clarity have changed the dynamic. You're no longer waiting passively. You're present without chasing. Listen closely now, because that presence feels different to them. It doesn't pressure. It doesn't plead. It simply exists. And that existence forces them to decide what they want to do with their loneliness. Stay with me, because loneliness doesn't disappear on its own. It transforms when it's met with honesty, either through connection or through self-acceptance. Your soulmate is standing at that threshold now. Listen carefully, because this threshold doesn't demand a dramatic step. It asks for a real one. Real doesn't mean perfect. It means sincere. It means conscious. Stay right here, because whatever choice they make, this moment will shape how they handle loneliness going forward. Whether they retreat again or step toward expression. Whether they repeat old patterns or begin new ones. Listen closely now, because you're not responsible for their choice. Your responsibility is to yourself, to remain honest, grounded, and open without self-erasure. Stay with me, because the most important thing happening right now isn't what they'll do next. It's that loneliness has finally been acknowledged instead of avoided. And acknowledgement is the beginning of change. Breathe. You don't need to force an outcome. You don't need to rescue anyone. You only need to stay true to what you've learned, about silence, presence, and your own worth. Loneliness came today not to punish, but to point. And both of you are being asked, quietly, to decide how you'll respond. Stay with me until the very end, because this final part isn't about them anymore, it's about what this moment completes inside you. After all the reflection, the awareness, the quiet tension, and the emotional signals that surfaced, something reaches its natural conclusion. Not with fireworks. Not with certainty. But with truth. And truth, when fully felt, always brings an ending of one kind or another. Listen carefully, because loneliness has done its job now. It has revealed what was hidden, softened what was guarded, and exposed what mattered. Your soulmate may still be deciding how to respond to what they feel, but you are no longer suspended inside that decision. You've moved somewhere steadier. Somewhere clearer. Somewhere that doesn't depend on waiting. Stay right here, because this clarity didn't come easily. It came from sitting with discomfort instead of running from it. From acknowledging that silence has consequences. From understanding that connection requires presence from both sides, not patience from one. That understanding has changed you in a way that can't be undone. Listen closely now, because you may feel a strange mix of emotions settling in. Sadness, yes, but also relief. Relief that you're no longer guessing. Relief that you're no longer questioning whether your needs were too much. Relief that you finally trusted yourself enough to stop shrinking. That relief matters more than any outcome. Stay with me, because endings don't always mean separation. Sometimes they mean the end of waiting, the end of hoping in silence, the end of carrying uncertainty alone. Even if the connection continues, it cannot continue the way it was. Something old has closed. Something more honest must replace it. Listen carefully, because you're no longer asking, "What should I do to keep this?" You're asking, what feels aligned with who I am now? That shift is powerful. It means you're choosing from self-respect instead of fear. And choices made from self-respect tend to lead somewhere healthier, even if they hurt at first. Stay right here, because if your soulmate does reach out, you'll meet them differently now. Not from longing. Not from imbalance. But from grounded honesty. You won't over-explain. You won't overgive. You'll listen, feel, and respond from clarity. That changes the entire dynamic. Listen closely now, because if they don't reach out, that silence will no longer feel confusing. It will feel like information. Clear, grounded information that allows you to grieve without questioning your worth. And grieving with clarity heals faster than hoping in uncertainty ever could. Stay with me, because this is where acceptance enters. Acceptance doesn't mean approval. It means understanding what is and releasing the fight against it. You stop asking why things unfolded this way and start asking how you want to live going forward. Listen carefully, because going forward doesn't require forgetting or hardening. It requires integration. Taking what this experience taught you, about communication, courage, and self-abandonment, and carrying it with you into the next chapter. Stay right here, because the next chapter isn't empty. It's open. And openness feels different when you're no longer afraid to be seen. You won't love quietly anymore. You won't wait indefinitely anymore. You won't confuse endurance with devotion. Listen closely now, because the version of you who emerges from this is stronger, but softer too. Softer because you understand human fear. Stronger because you no longer let fear decide for you. That balance is rare, and it's valuable. Stay with me, because you're also releasing something important tonight, the belief that timing defines worth. It doesn't. Timing reveals readiness, not value. You are always worthy of presence. You are always deserving of honesty. Listen carefully, because this realization may bring tears of its own, not from loss, but from relief. Relief that you finally chose yourself without closing your heart. Relief that you honored love without sacrificing dignity. Stay right here, because dignity is what carries you forward with peace. It allows you to look back without resentment and ahead without desperation. It steadies you in moments of uncertainty. Listen closely now, because your soulmate's loneliness today was real, but it wasn't yours to fix. It was a mirror, not a responsibility. And you responded by becoming more honest, more grounded, more whole. Stay with me, because that wholeness is the true ending here. Not a relationship status. Not a final conversation. Wholeness. The moment when you stop needing an outcome to feel complete. Listen carefully, because from this place, love becomes choice instead of need. Presence instead of pursuit. Mutual instead of one-sided. And that kind of love finds you differently. Stay right here, because whatever unfolds next, reconnection, distance, or closure, you will meet it without losing yourself. You won't disappear to be chosen. You won't stay silent to be kept. You won't carry uncertainty alone. Listen closely now, because this is the quiet victory. Not loud. Not obvious. But real. Breathe deeply. Let the story rest where it belongs. You listened when loneliness spoke. You honored what it revealed. You chose presence over silence. And that choice, more than anything else, changes the future. Stay connected. Stay honest. Stay here with yourself. This chapter is complete.